I think 67% of them wanted a complete ban on abortion. And, one of the things that they have been pushing are these so-called personhood amendments. And the Personhood Amendments would say, basically they say that a fertilized egg is a human being that has all, the rights afforded to it as a conscious human being under the Constitution. And so there are legitimate legal questions about this, that, if a woman has a miscarriage, could she actually be tried for murder? And in Mexico, where they have some of these personhood, it's sort of divided all over the place in their regions about who has these. But there are a phenomenal amount of women serving time because they had abortions. Or not abortions, they had miscarriages.
Well, yes, and actually we saw some states in the last, in 2009, where legislative members, extreme Christian Dominionist, Republican legislative members, introduced legislation to make it punishable, as manslaughter if a woman were to have a miscarriage. Now, who is going to determine what was, how that miscarriage happened?
Well, exactly, and it could also ban contraceptives. And,
well, absolutely, and or at least restrict what contraceptives. And we just heard Jim DeMint come out in this last week and make a statement that homosexuals should not be teachers and essentially wanton women, mm-hmm. Who have sex outside of marriage. Interestingly enough, it didn't mention men who have sex outside of marriage.
Exactly.
This is a very misogynistic, Old Testament-based, Bible-based cult. And I know people cringe when I say that, but it is. It's not Christianity.
No, it's not. And speaking of that, one of the proponents, I've signed up to all these, there's I think there are like 7 or 8 of these things now where you pray and fast over the elections coming up. All these groups are having them, and one of them is Cindy Jacobs. And so one of my prayer things for the day, we're supposed to pray for Proposition 62 to pass in Colorado, Amendment 62, which is the only personhood amendment that made it to the ballot this year to be voted on. And actually, how the states, the legislative councils will publish those voters' guidelines that, it lists what the proposed language says, and then it has the pros and cons, and then it analyzes the cost to the state and the legal ramifications. Well, anyway, Personhood Colorado said that it was unfair and biased, and so they sued to make the state republish and revise these blue books and send them out all over the state, basically the way that they wanted it to be. So the judge respectfully bowed out by saying he didn't have jurisdiction. Well, anyway, that was on my prayer list, that that he would find wisdom.
Well, and isn't that interesting, since they hand out voter guides in congregations on the Sundays before the Tuesday elections, and they've been doing this now for a couple of decades. And so isn't it interesting that it's like, well, we can do it, but no, you can't.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of Cindy Jacobs, she is she's like one of these apostles under C. Peter Wagner in this Dominionism thing.
Oh, she's a senior. She's like a senior vice president.
Mm-hmm. So
who
Leah
liked
and
to shop a lot, we found out, didn't we? Because both Deb and I attended her webinar with C. Peter Wagner the other night.
So it took a couple of beers to do, and they had told all the people on this mailing list that this was going to be at a certain time and that you could call in with questions, and and I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to really ask these people about some of this stuff. And so Leah and I go there, and what was it, Leah?
They started like an hour before.
Exactly. And then they weren't taking any questions, and it was like this big infomercial, but C. Peter Wagner talked, and it was one of the most bizarre things I have ever sat through in my life. It was like the New Age with this Jesus-y kind of thing, and Cindy Jacobs throws a little brimstone into it, but he was actually saying things like, you will do all of these things that Jesus did, all the miracles and more. And then they were going off on how they were the second Adam. I have to digest that a little bit.
I do too. It was so overwhelming, and between that and her professing her love for shopping while begging people to donate money and up the money that they've been donating at $100 a month to more, and then promising everybody by doing a prayer that she was going to heal all their toothaches and not only heal it, but their teeth would be covered in gold and also have a image of the cross on it. There's a point where it just, your brain shuts down.
But what is so alarming about this is, I mean, this stuff is so bizarre. I mean, seriously, folks, I'm going to put that on, some of it on God Discussion so you can hear it for yourself. And actually, it's freely available on their websites as well. But what is alarming about this is the influence that they have in the military, in our politics. Who I'm going to introduce to the show right now is Chris Rodda. Many of you know her as the author of a book called Liars for Jesus, where she dissects David Barton's version of history, which he is preaching on Glenn Beck and everywhere else, saying that we are a Christian nation. But Chris is also the senior research director for the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Chris, thank you for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And our call-in number is 914-338-0452. And when you call in, I think you have to press 1, and then I will see your hand come up in the switchboard, and I can put you on the air. And how I will identify you is with your area code, and then you know that you're on the air. And you can also put questions in through the chat room, too. I'm going to be following that. But this Christian dominionist type of thing, well, Leah, I'm going to ask you first, what exactly is Christian dominionism?
Well, I've been refining my definition of Christian dominionism because I think what we all need to understand is that it's extremely fractured. It's very complex. A lot of the people under this umbrella that I'm painting actually don't agree with each other, but the bottom line is that they have a goal that is common at the end. And so I say that all Christians are not dominionists, but all dominionists claim Christianity. Defined in its simplest form, Christian dominionism is a political approach to Christian faith and practice based on literalistic interpretation of the dominion mandate given by God in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, that at creation the chosen are to subdue the earth and have dominion over all living creatures. The goal of Christian dominionism is to abolish separation of church and state and to establish the United States as a distinctively Christian nation based upon Old Testament law. Dominionism is an umbrella that harbors many divergent groups claiming a foundation in Christianity. They are heavily neo-Pentecostal and include evangelicals, fundamentalists, steeplejack Baptists, Calvinists, and more. You must be born again, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and profess your personal relationship with Christ. And then that's the benchmark. You have to have a born-again birth date, or it doesn't matter if you were baptized, if you were raised Christian, you're not the right kind of Christian.